Happy Tuesday, coaches. Come on in. Happy Tuesday. It's a beautiful day here in Florida. Coming at you live. Couple minutes behind the hour. Thanks for your patience here. So I got all my goodies set up for you all. Juicy topic today. We're talking about how to land podcast interviews that will ultimately increase your sales. So that's the idea here. How to land podcast interviews that will ultimately increase your sales. So juicy topic that I'm going to run through with y'all today. Hey Randy, thanks for dropping in here. For those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Betty Kempa, business coach for coaches, member of the Forbes Coaches Council, IPEC graduate, ranked one of the top coaches in Denver by Influence Digest, and the founder of the Corporate to Six Figure Coach Academy, where we help corporate renegades ditch the 9-to-5 and repackage their genius into a six-figure coaching business. Why? So they can feel passionate about what they do as a coach, so they can enjoy the freedom of entrepreneurship. Man, I love working from home. I don't know. Drop into the chat if you're currently working from home. I would assume maybe most of you are currently. I don't know how many of you are at work watching this, or maybe you're listening to this on the way to work. But I'm looking this way because I always look out my window. You have a nice patch of land to the right of my office window, and I don't know, it just feels good. It feels good to be able to have freedom of entrepreneurship. Freedom, baby. What else do I want to tell you before we get started? A couple things you should know about the way I teach, because every coach teaches different. Every business coach has a different way that they teach. What's going on, Andrea? One of our superstars. Happy working from home. Happy Tuesday. Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Drop me a hashtag live if you're here live. Drop me a hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. I know some of my corporate 9-to-5ers are not able to watch this live. So they're watching the replay, which is totally cool. And if you're watching the replay, feel free to still drop in questions. Just tag me and or Heather Copey to make sure we can answer your questions even on the replay. There's Jill, one of our Superstar Academy members. Yes, very blessed indeed. Life is good. Hey, Optimum Assisting coming at us live. Good stuff, good stuff. Couple quick things before I get going here to share with you here. Number one, the way that I teach as a business coach, I am teaching my clients. Most of my clients are coming out of the corporate world, right? They've got a full-time job that they're trying to balance with building their coaching business. And I teach my clients how to create a high-ticket program so that they can sell 1 to 2 packages per month to hit their financial target of replacing their corporate income versus burning out, selling lower ticket or digital courses, right? That's a straight path to burnout if you're planning on replacing your corporate income with those types of things. So again, it's not just about the ticket, it's about the value. And what I do with my clients is help them double the value of what they want to price their package at. That's what I'm good at. The second thing I focus on here is organic marketing. Facebook ads are cool, but not necessary before you hit your first 6 figures. So Facebook ads, complicated funnels, not necessary before you hit your first 6 figures. So we talk about organic here. What's going on, Steve English? One of my buddies. He's here with us live. Good stuff, Steve. Debbie, one of my Academy superstars, here with us live. Oh, I got all the gang here today. Exciting stuff. Before we get going, again, how to land podcast interviews that will increase your sales. Would love to hear too. We're coming, what is it, August 22nd? We're marching slowly towards the end of summer. I'd love to hear in the comments, what is one thing that you want to do before the end of this summer? It doesn't have to be business related. Eileen, another academy. Yeah, the academy is showing up today. They're going to be showing up on their coaching calls this week. You guys are Superstars. These are my overachievers. Yeah, drop into the chat. What is one thing you want to do before the end of the summer? It doesn't have to be business related. Just one thing you want to do before the end of the summer. As always, if you'd like additional coaching support with your business, check out, there's a link in the copy of this post where you can apply for a discovery call with my team so we can learn more about your business challenges and goals. That's the point of a discovery call. We can learn about you. You can ask us questions. You can see and learn more about the Corporate to Six-Figure Coach Academy. So if you want to learn more, book a discovery call. One quick housekeeping announcement before we get to today's juicy topic, how to land podcast interviews that will increase your sales, right? This is a part of a sales funnel here. I do want to announce something very, very exciting and something new, something very exciting and something new. Let's see here. Just reading the comments here. Natasha, my friend, no spamming, my friend. That's a spam comment. That's a no-no. Back to my exciting announcement. I'm very excited about this announcement. This is the first time I'm sharing this. You people here on this live are the first time hearing this announcement, okay? You guys, many of you know that I've run Choose Your Niche boot camp in the past. It's been a great boot camp. That's been a lot of fun. I've helped a lot of people choose their niche. I am switching it up. I am very excited to announce I am going to be doing, for the first time ever, a new workshop. The name of this workshop is the Strategic Corporate to Coach Transition Plan. That's the name of the workshop, the Strategic Corporate to Coach Transition Plan Workshop. I'm going to put in the chat a link for you to register for this new, it's free, of course. I'm going to put in the chat. Andrew, are you excited about this one? I'm excited about this one. I'm going to put a link in the chat for you guys to register. So real quick, I just want to touch on this real quick. What am I teaching? This is a totally new workshop. It is free. And let me just start by saying, why am I doing this workshop? And put in the chat, by the way, if this is something you're interested in joining. And if you are interested in joining, you have to register, right? You click on the link and register, and then we'll get you, you'll be one of the first people to receive the workbook that's accompanying this workshop. So let me talk about why I'm doing this and what's included. So here's the deal. A lot of the clients I work with are coming to me while they're still in their corporate job. Okay. And that was my story too, right? I worked a corporate job. A lot of my clients are coming to me. They're in a demanding corporate job and they know they want to coach, but they are totally clueless on what the actual transition plan looks like. Okay. So I've been hearing more and more questions on that topic, and I've been seeing more and more people struggle with what that transition looks like. Because what I see happening out in the marketplace with what other business coaches are talking about is, oh yeah, just marketing and sales and funnels. And it's like, no, that stuff comes after the transition plan. They're missing the mark. So what I'm going to be teaching in this free boot camp, mark your calendars, September 11th, is the start date, day one, how to mitigate financial risk when leaving your corporate job to coach. So this is where we talk about things like your budget, your business budget, your personal budget, how much you need to have in savings. We talk about health insurance. We talk about 401k. We talk about all the things that you know are in your mind freaking you out about making this transition. So we're going to talk about day one, how do we mitigate the financial risk? And believe me, I'm a risk-averse person. So we're going to talk about how to mitigate that financial risk when leaving your corporate job to coach. I'm going to give you guys an exact blueprint of what you need to do. Day two is going to be how to know when the timing is right to take the leap out of corporate. So meaning there are certain things you need to get done first before you jump out of your corporate job. There are certain things you need to get done first, both in your personal life, finances, etc., and in building your coaching business. You need to be at a certain point before you take the leap. Now, when I say need to be, I'm just saying this is a recommended transition plan so that you're mitigating risk. So that's what we're going to talk about day 2. Eileen, yes. And all my Academy members are going to get full access, Eileen, to this training as well in the On-Demand Learning Center. But yes, we're going to launch this workshop live. Day 3, which is a really important one in this workshop, we're going to talk about how to get clients while you're still at your corporate job. And I hear this a lot. Well, Betty, I'm still at my corporate job. I don't want to get fired, so I'm afraid to post on social media. You're not alone. Everybody's going through that. So I'm going to teach you on day 3, there are ways around that. There are ways that you can still get clients, still prove that you have a viable business that can replace your corporate income, because you need to prove that while you're still at your job without coming out of the closet, right? So I'm going to teach you how to get clients while still at your corporate job. I know a lot of people are scared about that. I can't post on social media. I can't do anything on LinkedIn. I totally get it. I'm going to give you the workaround. Day 4, we're going to talk about how to balance building your business while juggling your demanding corporate job. And I hear that all the time too, right? Betty, I get home from my corporate job. I'm exhausted. I don't even have it in me to work on building my business. So we're going to talk about what it's going to take, what you need to do at the corporate job to create more balance, what you need to do in your personal life to create more balance so that you have a pocket of time to work on building the dream, which is your business. So we're going to talk about that day 4. And day 5, I'm bringing in a coach who successfully made the transition from corporate to coach. She successfully made the transition. And shortly after she made the leap, I think it was about 3 months after she made the leap, she started having consecutive 10K months. And last I checked, she was at 35K in 3 months. So she's been having consecutive 10K months after that. I'm going to bring a behind the scenes interview so you guys can get to know how did she do it. So anyways, there will be a workbook. What's going on, Amber? This is where you're hugely struggling? Not yay, but yay that you have a free workshop to attend. So guys, register. You have to register so that we can put you on the list to receive a workbook. You have to register so that we can hook you up with your workshop concierge who will guide you through this workshop and help you where you feel struggled and point you in the right direction. Your concierge might even be able to get you free training content before the workshop. And Heather will even be doing short calls with people prior to the workshop to kind of give them a rundown on strategy, to give them a free audit, to get them geared up for this free workshop. So this is going to be huge. A lot of work I put into this. This is the first time I have ever done this workshop. So I want to see how it goes. I don't know if I'll ever do this one again or not. I got to see how it goes as far as, are you guys attending? And please also, share this link with your fellow corporate to coach friends, right? Share with some friends, get some accountability buddies. I am doing a contest for anybody that shares the link on their social media and talks, to people about, come with me to this workshop. You can get a free complimentary coaching call with me. So anyways, that went a little long, but I'm this is a big deal, you guys. Where I see coaches struggle, and I'm being serious about this, is they don't do some of the foundational corporate to coach transition plan work before they leave the corporate job. They don't. So if you are still in a corporate job, you have this extra runway. I want you to use the runway, and I want you to just like everything else you do in corporate is so strategic. I want your transition to be very strategic to mitigate financial risk so that by the time you make the jump, your business is already showing you it can bring in predictable income. Okay? So an important free workshop. Be sure to register. Link is in the comment to register. Hook up with Heather Copey if you have any questions as well. All right, let's get going here. I was just very excited. I'm very excited about this. Amber, can't wait to see you there too. All right, let's get into it. How to land podcast interviews that will increase your sales. If you have any questions on this topic, I don't want to be a talking head. So drop into the chat if you have any questions on the topic of how to land podcast interviews that will increase your sales. So the idea here, guys, is when you're first starting out as a coach, well, let's back up. If you want sales, you need to be having conversations. One of the best kind of conversations to have is a discovery call. So if you look at your calendar and you don't have any discovery calls booked, we got a little bit of a problem. Okay, so when you're first starting out as a coach, one of the best ways to get discovery calls booked is to leverage other people's audiences. Now, yes, you do need to build your own audience. You do. You need to build your own audience. But many of you also want to start booking discovery calls now. And the fact is that building your audience is going to take time. It is going to take time to build your audience. So yeah, you need to do it, but it's going to take time. So my point here is leveraging other audiences that already exist, that have members of your ideal client avatar. What's an ideal client avatar? Drop in the chat. What's an ideal client avatar? Drop it into the chat. And I don't have like an exact perfect right answer. Just want to make sure that the terminology I'm using, you guys know what the heck I'm talking about. Who knows what an ideal client avatar is? Actually, I should check on my phone. Sometimes I can't see your comments on my computer, which is so weird. Sometimes I have to look on my phone, which is fine. Let me just find my little video here and check the comments. Okay, comments. Okay, I'm like checking 5 different things for comments. Okay, great. Kim says your target audience as specifically as possible. Yes, Kim. Yep. What's going on? Margaret, nice to see you here too. So Kim got it right. Yeah, your target audience as specifically as possible. So that's what we're looking for, guys. Yeah, y'all need to be building your own audience, not just anybody, right? We talk about, yes, you need a niche. Yes, you need a specific who, and that specific who has a desire to solve a specific problem that you solve. So the idea here is, what podcast do my ideal client avatars listen to? What podcast already have an audience of my people? And how can I get in and get my foot in the door to leverage their audience, right? So we're going to talk about today, the best way to do that is to get interviewed on another person's podcast. They've already done all the work to build their audience up. So you got to find the podcast that have your ideal client avatars. Okay? So that's what I want to talk about today. How do you identify the podcast that have your ideal client avatars? What's the best way to get your foot in the door so that you can be interviewed as a guest expert on those podcasts? And how do you use a podcast interview as the ultimate sales funnel? That's what I want to cover today. So let's get into it here. Again, as always, if you have questions, drop them in, baby. As you have questions, drop them in. All right, so quick, I can't just get right into the what and the how without just touching on the why. Getting interviewed on someone else's podcast. Well, you guys drop into the chat. Why do you think that it's important to get interviewed on someone else's podcast? Or why would it be important to you to get interviewed on someone else's podcast? Drop it into the chat. Why do you think that's important? I want to hear what you guys think before I start blabbering on why I think it's important. Why do you, if I had a podcast here in my hand and it was full of your ideal client avatars, and I said, Jill, I want to interview you on my podcast, why would you say yes? Why would that be important to you? Andrea says you can tell your story. They get to know you. Absolutely, Andrea. And storytelling is a big one, right? Everybody should get very comfortable with telling their origin story. How did you come to be a coach? How did you come to be this type of coach in this space with this niche? Your audience wants to hear you went through the pain, problems, and challenges they went through, and you came out on the other side, right? You're a couple steps ahead of them. So absolutely, Andrea, you got it. You got it. And the know, like, and trust. That's a big one. The know, like, and trust. When somebody hears you, there's some know, like, and trust. So great answer there, Andrea. And that leads me to my next point. And this is a big one. And I talk to my clients about this all the time. It is not my desire just for y'all to choose a niche. Oh, I'm a career coach. I help corporate director to VP women, It's not enough for you to choose a niche anymore. What I want, what I teach each of my clients in the Corporate to Six-Figure Coach Academy is that you also need to build your authority. Build your authority. So it's not enough to say, oh, I've got a niche. You need to become the go-to expert in your space. You want to be known for your niche, right? Also, when it comes to leveraging other people's audience, that audience will momentarily become your audience. And what will happen is you will very likely have a chunk of that audience trickle over to follow you and your content and potentially hire you. You will have a much warmer lead. Let's say you have 2 discovery calls. One makes the call. They just see a link to book your discovery call on your website. They're like, okay, I'll book a call. And then another lead hears you on a podcast being interviewed as an expert authority on a topic. And they hear that. And they're like, wow, this person really knows their stuff. And then they book a discovery call. Which lead do you think is going to be warmer? Which lead do you think is going to be closer to closing? Right? Lead number 2. So we're leveraging someone else's audience. Like Andrea said, building your authority with the audience that you already have, they'll already know and like you, and it'll help them trust you as well. And last but not least, side note, once you get interviewed on a podcast, you don't want to just let that podcast do the work as far as marketing. You too want to take that podcast and blast it out on your social media, blast it out to your email list, right? You want to share that because then you're doubling your exposure. You're getting their audience, and then the audience you already have, you're like, look, I was interviewed on this thing. So you're doubling your exposure. All right, so let's get into it with getting interviewed on other people's podcasts. It's a great way to boost your brand awareness and credibility, which does in turn trickle down to more sales. So let's talk about it. I would recommend, well, let me start with this. Let me pull back. Everybody's at a different part of their journey right now in building their coaching business. Everybody's at a different part of their journey. Let me ask you guys this. In the perfect world, how many podcast interviews would you like to do per month? How many? Because I have a recommendation, but I kind of want to see where you all are at. Some of you might be at a place where you're like, yeah, I want to do it in the future, buddy, but I don't think I'm quite there yet. Some of you will say, nope, I'm ready. Let's get going. So I'm curious, how many podcast interviews in the perfect world would you like to do per month? Just curious before I give my recommendation, because I'm kind of trying to get a gauge of where everybody's at. I know where my clients are at, but I'm trying to get a gauge where everybody else is at. So the question is, how many podcasts in the perfect world would you like to get interviewed on per month? Okay, sorry. It's so funny, you guys. If anybody does a Facebook Live, just FYI, the comments don't always come through on your computer screen, which is what I'm looking at here. They come through on the phone. It's very funny. And Eileen, you got it too. Expose yourself to people you don't know and identify yourself as an expert in that space. Great. So Rachel says 2, Optimum Assisting 3 to 4, Eileen 1 to 2, Andrea 2, Amber 1. Awesome. So good. And then my recommendation would actually be for people who are starting out, you know, when you've got a lot of balls that you're juggling in the air, 2 podcast interviews per month. 2 podcast interviews per month. That would be my recommendation. That is unless you've gotten all your major projects that you're working on completed. Sometimes during a slow month, so when you get going, and I'm making this up because, you know, it differs depending on your space, your niche. Let's just say I'm making this up, that July is a slow month for you. It's summertime, the kids are home, people are on vacation. Let's just say that's a slow month. The other thing you can do, if you're like, oh yeah, I could do 2 podcast interviews per month, or you could take a slow month, kind of like a slump month, and use that as like a PR blast and say, this month, my number 1 project is PR. And maybe that month you do at least 1 podcast interview per week, right? And you could do that for a couple months. If you're like, I'm going to do a PR, kind of like you see celebrities do a PR blitz. They'll go to New York City and they'll just do interview. So that's another way to do it too. You take a slump month, and I'm not saying stop outreaching and ignore sales. No, keep outreaching, keep selling, keep serving your clients. But if it's a slower month, you can use it as a PR blitz, get out there and do a bunch of podcast interviews. So you have an option. So here's the deal with podcast interviews. A couple things. First, I want to tell you, you will get less and less nervous with each podcast interview. I will say for my first podcast interview, I was very nervous. I'm an introvert. I didn't even like being on camera at first. You know what I mean? I was nervous. But every time I did an interview, it was like chipping away at a nice sculpture. I got less and less and less nervous. So that is something to keep in mind if you're like, whoa, this feels very nerve-wracking. And what's nice about doing podcast interviews is you're going to prepare the same topics over and over so you can use the same notes as well. So you don't have to think of it like, you know, after you do a certain number of podcasts, you're going to have core topics that people usually interview you on. You'll have some core topics, probably like 5 core topics. You'll have notes on each of those topics. So there will come a certain point where the podcast host will decide, oh yeah, that topic would work best with my audience. And it's kind of a rinse and repeat. You've already done that interview topic before. So that's kind of nice. Do be aware that some of these podcast interviews will be audio only. You know, you'll just be connecting via audio. You can be in your pajamas, you can be in bed. But more and more lately, because people want to repurpose their content, podcast interviews are often video as well, because people are trying to repurpose their content. So just make sure you confirm whether or not you're going to be on camera before you start the interview, because that could be a situation otherwise. Let's talk about how do you land a podcast interview. Let's talk about how do you land a podcast interview. I would say, just to start, we're just talking about starters to start with. The easiest thing to do is literally get into Facebook after this live, don't leave me yet, and do a search in Facebook for podcast. Do a search for the word podcast. And the key is you want to hit the groups tab. So we're doing a search for the word podcast, but you want to hit the groups tab because we're looking for Facebook groups about podcast. So I'd recommend you start there. Look for podcast groups. Especially, you'll notice there's some that are just like podcast groups, and there are some groups that are even better that mention podcast guest. This group is for podcast guest, but join them all. Join them all. I'll give you a couple names. I don't know if they're still out there, but there's one called I'll Guest for That Podcast. I'll guest for that podcast. There's one called that as a Facebook group. Podcast Guest Connection is another really good one. Of course, we're looking for groups that are large, that are active. Poddit, I don't know if they're still out there. Poddit, Poddit is another good group. So long story short, you want to join as many as these podcast related groups as you can. Okay. Now, keep a list of the ones that you tried to join. Keep a list so you can remember, right? Because they're going to they're probably going to ask you questions before you come in, and you're going to have to remember who to come back to once they let you in. So keep that list and go back and check, day by day, did I get accepted into this Facebook group? And once you come in, read the rules. Read the rules of the group. You guys know every group is different. Every Facebook group is different. I recommend, if they let you, depending on the rules of the group, it would be nice for you to share a post introducing yourself. Share a post introducing yourself. So it'd be nice if you could come in, share a picture of you so they know who they're talking to, a nice professional picture of you. Share your coaching title, right? I'm a career coach. I'm a relationship coach. I'm a divorce coach. Share your niche statement, your I help who with what, so that statement. Share your intent. Share your intent. And your intent is, hey, I want to be a guest. I'm looking to become a guest. And then provide 4 to 5 topics that you'd feel comfortable to speak on. Now, I'm going to say PS in the Corporate to Six-Figure Coach Academy. This is for my clients and anyone who's about to become a client. In Module 2, I teach you guys how to create your own unique signature method. So when you guys are thinking about 4 to 5 topics to speak on, it likely is going to be a bucket from your signature methodology. So again, I teach my clients how to build a signature method. When you're coming up with what are 4 to 5 topics I can speak on, it's likely one of the steps from your signature methodology, right? You list all those steps. For those of you who haven't created a signature method yet, well, first of all, get with Heather on that. But second of all, I do want to tell you too, you can list topics that you know are urgent problems in your niche space, right? Because that's what it is at the end of the day, right? Your niche has an urgent problem they're looking to solve. So if you can come up with 4 to 5 topics talking about how to solve that urgent problem, that's a great topic for a podcast interview. Do be cognizant of how you phrase your topics. Meaning, if you say, yeah, I can speak on X, Y, and Z, if they sound bland and boring and basic, that is not good. Okay? Spice it up a little. Make sure that your topics that you're saying you can speak on and they also need to be specific. So spice them up, make sure that they sound interesting, and please don't let them be generic. If you list a generic topic that could be for any niche, it's going to be tough to get a podcast interview. So your topic needs to be very specific. Okay? Also, if there is a topic that is relevant to current events, you will likely double your chance of getting interviewed. So for example, when the pandemic hit, a career coach could say, hey, I can speak on your podcast on how to virtually interview during a pandemic. How to do a virtual interview, right? You get my drift? Or a relationship coach, sometime before Valentine's Day, could say, hey, I can speak on how to land a significant other by Valentine's Day. And you'd need to pitch that a couple months beforehand to make sure the interview goes live before Valentine's Day. Okay? Let's see if I can pull up here. I don't know if I have a script. I might. Let's see if I can pull up here a script for you guys. On something I would post. Here it is. Okay. I'm going to read this out loud. I'm going to read this out loud to you guys. And by the way, if you want a copy of this pitch, this is something that I would literally, back when I was a career coach, I would post this in podcast Facebook groups, and I would get people to reach out to me and say, yeah, I want to interview you. So I'm going to read this to you. If you want a copy of this pitch, DM Heather Copey, and she will give you the entire script. Okay? But here it is. I'm going to read it to you. If you want the script, DM Heather Copey. Heather, wave in the comments, and she'll get you the script. So here it is. I would post this in a Facebook group for podcasts. I'd say, hey guys, and again, if you can, you post it with a picture of yourself. Hey guys, I'm a career coach who helps corporate director to VP women feeling unfulfilled in their jobs get clarity on their dream career. I'd love to share my message as a guest on your podcast. I can speak on the following topics. 1, how to get clarity on what your dream job truly is, especially in midlife, 30s, 40s, and 50s. 2, how to face your fear when going after your dream job. 3, building the bridge to help you achieve your dream job and secrets to getting your foot in the door. 4, the mindset it takes to successfully career shift. Do you know anyone whose podcast I could add value to? Thanks all, Betty. You have a website, you can flip it in there too. If you don't worry about it. So again, that's the script I would use. And if you want Heather to send you the script, she just waved. Just DM her and say, give me the script, girl. And after the live, she'll hand you over the script. Okay, so that's an example. Now, there's 2 ways to post. So just to be clear here, there's 2 ways to post. One, the best way is if you post your own post with a picture and your ask, but read the rules of the group. Sometimes the group will have a welcome post and they'll say, oh, share what you do below the welcome post. And then you have to share below the welcome post. So you just need to read the rules of the group. Then you need to keep your eye, this is important, on your Facebook alerts to see if you get any bites, right? People responding to your post. You're going to have to keep an eye on your Facebook alerts. P.S. It's okay if you don't get any bites, right? And if that's the case, then I need you to keep your eye on those Facebook groups. Every day, you should be popping into those Facebook groups, or your virtual assistant can be popping into those Facebook groups. Okay, what are you looking for when you pop into these Facebook groups? You're looking to see what the podcast host have posted. Many of these groups will have podcast hosts who will go in and they will post, hey, I'm looking for an XYZ expert to speak on ABC. Who here knows that person? You want to be one of the first to respond to that. So I would check those. If you're really in a PR blitz, you or your VA check those groups first thing in the morning and see if any podcast hosts are looking for someone like you. And then you quick reply, shoot them a DM. Okay. I also want to tell you, there are websites and forums totally off Facebook for podcast hosts and guests to connect. Let's see. I think this one might have changed the name. This one used to be called podit.net. I wish Facebook would let me share my screen with you guys. Okay. Now it's called podcastpros.com. I'll drop it in the comments. Okay. So podcastpros.com, Podit teamed up with Podmatch. Okay. So this is another way outside of Facebook groups where you can sign up for the website. You can create a guest profile. You can create a guest profile. You can use your best picture, a juicy bio, etc. You can browse podcasts to pitch. So that website will let you browse podcasts to pitch. You can also get on their email list, and then you'll be getting emails that give you new podcast topics, and you can determine, ooh, that's a good topic for me. This is yet another way to get in front of the right podcast host. Okay. Now, I do want to say this too. There's a fancy way to pitch. So that to me is like a great way to pitch. I use that way to pitch. I got on all the podcasts I've ever gotten on. I used that kind of basic way of just saying, hey, this is what I do. Here are the 4 things I speak on. Who do you know? right? And then I kept my eyes out for people looking for topics that aligned, that I thought my niche is going to be in their audience, right? I do want to cover one fancier way to pitch your podcast self to be an interviewee on a podcast. Has anybody here ever heard of a podcast one sheet or a podcast one sheeter? It's called a podcast one sheet or a podcast one sheeter. That sounds kind of funny when I say that. A podcast one sheeter. I'm checking my comments here on my phone since it's hard to see. But let me tell you what it is. I don't see anybody responding yet. So podcast one sheet. A podcast one sheet is just like it sounds. It's one sheet and it's got all the information about you, a picture of you, your niche statement, your coaching title, the topics you speak on. Sometimes it even shares, ask me these questions to make it easier on the podcast host, right? These are some of the questions you can ask me. But it's almost like a resume, I guess, if you think about it. A podcast one-sheeter is good if you want to create a list of podcasts. So say you go to your phone, right? And you go to the podcast app and you search for podcasts where your ideal client avatars hang out. And you make a list of all those podcasts after going to your phone and looking at all the podcasts and searching for podcast keywords that align with your niche, right? You can make a list of those podcasts. A podcast one-sheeter is especially good if you're doing a cold pitch. You're doing a cold pitch. You're reaching out to somebody, not from a Facebook group, not from a forum, totally cold, right? So for example, a career coach might search on, the podcast app for career podcast or job seeker podcast. And maybe they'd make a list of relevant podcasts and then reach out cold to the podcast owner. Now, I do want to say this too. When you're making a direct pitch like that, especially to a well-known podcast, the way to elevate your pitch is with the podcast one-sheeter. Okay, you're going to send that to the host of the podcast. But here's very simple. Please, if you're going to take one thing away, write this down. If you're going this route, a direct pitch in a podcast one-sheet document to a podcast, it's a cold outreach. And let me just say, side note, if you guys are like, well, I don't even know what that looks like. And this is something that for my clients and Mod 4 guys, for the Academy clients, I show you guys examples of what a podcast one sheet looks like, a template looks like. So for my clients, that's in Mod 4 under the lesson on PR and podcast. But for the rest of you, you guys could Google podcast one sheet and look at the images. You're going to get ideas for a template. You could also go to a freelancer site like Fiverr.com and search on Fiverr.com for podcast one sheet. And there will be a bunch of freelancers who have pretty templates. Now, here's the deal. They will make your template pretty, your brand colors, your logo, your picture. They'll take your words and put them in there. It'll look pretty, but they won't write the copy for you. So again, to my Academy clients, guys, Academy clients, if you're looking for a podcast one-sheeter, work with me or JJ, the copy coach, to write copy for your podcast one-sheeter. The podcast one-sheeter designers in Fiverr, they're not going to write the copy for you. You have to provide them the copy, okay? So that being said, when you're pitching a podcast cold, you don't want to just flip them your one-sheeter and say, hey, I want to be on your podcast. That's not enough, okay? So especially if it's a more well-known podcast, and by the way, I would start with lesser-known podcast, work your way up. It's good to show them like, hey, I've been on a couple podcasts. Here are some examples of me being on podcasts. So please, it's okay to start small. But when you start pitching cold, one thing you need to remember is you can't just flip them the one-sheeter. You need to customize your outreach, just like anything else you do, okay? You need to listen to at least one or two of their podcasts. You then need to send them a message that acknowledge and validates something that you loved about the podcast episode you listened to. Okay, that's the first thing you have to share with them. I listened to this podcast. I loved it because XYZ. Okay, so that shows You did your homework. Number two, you need to show you've done your homework on who their audience is. And you need to take a look at all the podcast topics that they've done in the last year or so. You know, kind of just scan it. What podcast topics have they done? And then you want to pitch to them in your email a new topic they haven't done yet and tell them why you think their audience would appreciate this topic, right? Hey, from what I've researched, from what I gathered, your audience seems to be XYZ type of people. You know, I noticed you never interviewed anybody on XYZ topic before. And based on my research, I think your audience would be highly interested in this specific topic. So you see what I'm saying here? If you can prove to that podcast host that you've done your homework, you've listened to their podcast, you know their audience, you've seen other topics they've done, and you've got an idea for something new they haven't done yet, you're in. See what I'm saying? Okay, this is the last thing I want to share here about podcast. When you start to pitch a lot of podcasts, a lot of P's there, when you start to pitch a lot of podcasts, it is easy to lose track of who are you talking to? Who are you talking to, right? It's like, oh yeah, I booked with this person. I got to follow up with this person. This person didn't answer me, right? So very important. I want to leave you with this. You have to use a podcast tracker to track where you're at with each podcast and with each host, okay? Academy members, I provide you guys a podcast tracker in the Academy. You guys have a tracker in Mod 4 under the lesson in PR if you're in the Academy. If you want to be in the Academy, book a discovery call with Heather because I don't want anyone to feel left out. Book a discovery call with Heather, learn more about the Academy, okay? And there's a link to book discovery call also pinned at the top of the chat. And Heather, you can post that again too. I don't want people to feel left out. But I do want, I see some of my Academy members are popping in. You guys have a tracker. So just use that tracker. For the people that don't, book a discovery call, but also high level, just to tell you what we're tracking here. You're tracking things like the date that you scheduled your podcast interview, the day and time of the interview, the method of the interview, video or audio, the Zoom interview link. As soon as they give it to you, you don't want to be scrambling for it. The name of the podcast. Don't want to forget what name. Believe me, when you start pitching, you think I'm being crazy here, but it starts to get confusing. Like, wait, what podcast is this? Who is the host? You got to track it. The podcast link to all the podcasts so you can review them ahead of the podcast, get to know the style. The podcast description so you know who the audience is. You want to be speaking to that audience. Your podcast contact. You don't want to call the host the wrong name. You also want to be tracking in your tracker your outreach and your follow-up. Remember, just like anything else, just like selling, like outreach, it's all in the follow-up. This is the same thing. Sometimes you'll reach out once. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Sometimes you'll reach out once and you won't get a response. You'll need to follow up. Track your follow-ups. Track how you're reaching out. What's your method of communication? Track your status. Is the interview scheduled? Have you heard back at all yet? Where are you in the process? Right? You should be tracking the status and then tracking the next steps you're going to take. Okay? So again, as you converse with more and more people, the tracker is going to come in handy. Last thing I want to share, as I see we're kind of closing in on the hour here, is the topic of, well, Betty, how does this become a sales funnel? How does this become a sales funnel? So this is a conversation you want to have with the podcast host once you land the interview. They're like, yes, I want to interview you. You're like, great. You're going to speak on this topic, okay? You can ask the podcast host ahead of time, like, hey, do you give me the questions ahead of time? Some of them will, some of them won't. Some of them will be like, oh, it's more conversational. Either way, you need to prepare. Very important that and sometimes the host is going to ask for almost like your bio so that they can introduce you. Again, for my clients, if you need help writing a bio for podcast hosts to introduce you, great hot seat topic, okay? But somebody needs to introduce you, whether it's you or the host, your name, your coaching title, and your niche, and sometimes what makes you unique, right? Then you're going to get into the interview, whatever topic you're being interviewed on, and talk to the host ahead of time and ask, hey, at the end of the podcast, now you guys get to choose. What do you want? How do you want your sales funnel to look at the end of the podcast? You get to choose. And I would mix it up and then I would test which is landing better. So here are some options for a call to action at the end of each podcast interview. Option 1 is you share your free lead magnet. So this is a conversation you need to have with the podcast host before the podcast. Hey, I've got a free guide. I'd love to share this with your audience. Could you put this free guide in the show notes? And could I mention it at the end of the podcast? Right? So sometimes they'll say, oh, Betty, is there anything else you want to share? I say, yeah, actually, I've got this free guide on how to transition from corporate to coach. And the podcast host will say, oh, I'll drop the link to that in the show notes. And what does that do for you? How is that a sales funnel? Because they don't get the guide. It's not a PDF. It's a link leading them to a landing page to input their name and email in order to get the guide. So that sales funnel is podcast interview, download the guide. Now they're on your email list. And once somebody's on your email list, this is where we start to transition to, yes, we're giving them value, but every PS in the email is PS book a call, PS book a call, PS book a call. So if you want to go that route with the sales funnel, it's podcast interview, lead magnet, email list, and then on the emails, we're reminding people to book a discovery call. That's sales funnel number 1. Sales funnel number 2, maybe you have a low ticket item that you'd like to give a coupon to. In the Corporate to Six-Figure Coach Academy, I call this a carrot dangle item. And for my clients, I teach you guys about this in Module 2. I teach my clients about this in Module 2. If you want to become a client, book a call because I don't want you to feel left out. Book a discovery call. Talk to Heather. See if it's right for you. But what a carrot dangle is a low ticket item. And you could say something to the podcast host like, hey, I have a $100 off coupon for your audience if they book within 30 days. Here's a link for them to redeem that coupon. And a carrot dangle item is usually some kind of coaching session with you. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but it's usually one coaching session that will provide them a specific outcome. So let me give you an example. It might be an assessment and then you do a debrief. It could be it could be an audit of some type, but it's a chance for you to show your skill of being an amazing coach in an hour. And then at the end of that hour, you pitch your package. So that's option 2 for a sales funnel. Let me give you a coupon for my low ticket one coaching session. They use that coupon. It's got an expiration date. And then once they use the coupon, I wow them with my coaching skills and then pitch my package. And then option 3 is straight to the discovery call, right? So telling the host, hey, I really want to connect with people from your group. Here's a link for them to book a discovery call with me. But you have to, if you go that route, share your discovery call link in a way where the audience will understand what's in it for me, right? So you have to talk about, once you book your discovery call, you're going to learn what are the problems standing in the way of you achieving XYZ, and what is the steps to get you out of that problem and into the outcome you're desiring. And the steps are going to be your signature method. So those are 3 examples of how you can turn a podcast interview into a sales funnel. Okay, 3 examples of how to turn a podcast interview into a sales funnel. And then absolutely keep your eye on when the podcast host starts marketing that podcast. You better keep your eye on anybody commenting. And you better reach out to anybody commenting on social media and ask them, oh, I saw you commented about the podcast. Did you enjoy it? And see if they want to get on a discovery call. Same thing with you. You're going to blast it to your audience, right? So I hope you guys are walking away today seeing how this is a sales funnel for you. Okay. So there you have it, guys. How to land podcast interviews, which ultimately will help increase your sales. I want you to drop a comment below before we log off. What is your biggest takeaway from today's lesson? Drop a comment below before I hit stop. What's your biggest takeaway from today's lesson? You can always share also what's the next big challenge you're facing and how can we help you with it. As always, if you'd like additional coaching support with your business, check out the link in the copy of the post to book a discovery call with us. Just like I said to you guys, when you get on a discovery call, you will learn, right? That's kind of the point is we dig with you to see what's really standing in the way. And sometimes you don't know what's standing in the way. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. That's our job, right? So we figure out what's in the way between you and your goals. You can ask us any questions. And then we walk you through, this is the process to get you from A to Z. So book a discovery call, and very important, register for the upcoming new free workshop, the strategic transition from corporate to coach. First time I'm ever doing this workshop. Not sure if I'm ever going to do it again. Going to have to see how it goes. Going to have to see how many attend. Please share the link with any friends that you think would find use out of it. We're going to really dig in. This last thing I'm going to say too. My man moved them up on my bookshelf. I've got like 9 books on this topic, the transition from corporate to coach. I'm going through all of them as I think about what I want to tell you guys. None of these books even have the real nitty gritty of what you need to do to make the transition. It's wild. I don't know why, but that information isn't out there. People are, like it's not happening. So I'm going to give it all to you guys so that when you do make the jump, you feel safe and secure and you've mitigated all risk. All right. So be sure to register. Be sure to share that registration link. And I will catch you same time, same place next week, Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Heather, I'm going to get with Heather now to give her the copy so she can shoot it over to anybody who DM'd her looking for the copy on how to pitch their podcast or how to pitch their interview to a podcast host. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. And I will catch you next week.